About a dozen pronghorn grazed in the open field across the highway from the Motel 6. Hannah leaned against the railing and watched them for a long time, occasionally taking a drag off a cigarette. There wasn't a soul in sight, just her and the pronghorn. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen an animal in the wild, well, besides the occasional stray cat in a downtown Denver alley. It was tranquil, almost like she was watching an old-time Western. Her alarm was set for 7:30, but after tossing and turning all night, she'd finally decided to crawl out of bed a little after 6. Like a kid on Christmas morning, she was excited for what the days and weeks would bring. She was also terrified that she'd find nothing and have to go back to Denver with her tail between her legs, no closer to solving Casey's murder. After about 5 minutes, the pronghorn disappeared into the horizon and the rising sun. Even with the daybreak, the morning was frigid, probably only in the low 20s. Despite it being the second week in November, it felt like the middle of winter. Initially, her plan was to arrive in July or August to avoid the harsh weather, but temporarily closing the PI firm had taken longer than she'd expected. After taking the final drag, Hannah dropped the cigarette butt, then stomped it into the second-floor walkway and turned back to her door. She stared at the room number. 224. All even numbers that, if multiplied, totaled 16. Her second favorite number. A good omen. Sidestepping a crack in the walkway, she entered the room, then fastened the chain. Lumpy queen bed, cheap fake wood nightstand and dresser, TV with tinfoil wrapped around the antenna, and yellow, smoke-stained ceiling. It wasn't a 5-star hotel, it wasn't even 3 stars, but it didn't matter. It was a place to lay her head and sleep. The plan was to be here for a few weeks, maybe a month tops, then never, ever come back to Laramie or Wyoming. In the bathroom, she locked the door, turned on the shower, and waited 3 minutes until the water was hot. After the quick rinse, she barely dried herself, pulling her hair back and slipping on some clothes. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she opened the nightstand drawer and removed her gun from where it lay next to the Bible. Hannah made her way to the front lobby, where a lady, probably in her 60s, was complaining about a clogged toilet. The front desk clerk looked annoyed. After he gave multiple reassurances that maintenance would fix it within the hour, the lady stormed out, mumbling obscenities. Approaching the counter, Hannah greeted the clerk. "How can I help you this morning?" he said. "I was wondering where I could grab some breakfast. Just looking for something simple, eggs and coffee." "Well, my favorite spot is Annie's Diner. You're not going to find a better meal for a better deal in town. I personally love the French toast." "That sounds lovely. Could you give me directions?" The clerk looked up at Hannah and smiled. Then he grabbed a pen and started drawing a map of Laramie on a piece of motel stationery. She drove the half-mile to the diner and was soon seated at the countertop. A man wearing overalls, probably a farmer or mechanic, sat 2 stools to her left, while the 2 stools to her right were empty. She ordered a coffee and the sunrise special, which consisted of 2 scrambled eggs, 2 slices of bacon, hash browns, and an English muffin. As she ate, she skimmed the Fort Collins Coloradan. On page 7, a headline caught her eye. "Drunk driver dies in single-car accident outside of Wellington." In the 3rd sentence, the article listed the name of the driver. Corey Baker. That was a name Hannah hadn't heard in a long time, and she instantly became nauseous. Hannah and Corey had worked together at a Blockbuster Video in Fort Collins. At the time, she was barely 16 and a sophomore. It was the first real job she'd ever had. Corey was 2 years older and a senior at a different high school. After their first shift together, Hannah had developed a crush on him. Tall, with deep blue eyes, a perfect smile, and the funniest person she knew. But she'd seen his girlfriend and knew she'd never stand a chance with him. The other girl was beautiful and popular, and she came from a perfect family, her dad being the mayor of Fort Collins. Hannah, meanwhile, considered herself awkward, average-looking at best, and her family was the definition of dysfunctional. That didn't stop him from flirting with her every time they worked together, and that didn't stop her from daydreaming about them being a couple. About 3 months after she started, they had a Saturday night closing shift together. After the last customer left and the doors were locked, he unzipped his backpack and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and a 2-liter of Coke. He poured 2 drinks, offering her one. Without hesitation, Hannah grabbed the cup and took a large swig. She'd drank before and had been drunk more times than she could count, but it was always alone, pouring vodka from her dad's bottle and then refilling it with water. Before they left the store that night, Corey invited her back to his house to drink some more. She declined at first, saying that she didn't think it was a good idea. Up to that point, she'd only kissed 2 boys, and no one she was romantically interested in had seen her naked. But Corey was persistent, and she finally caved and agreed to go. That night, she lost her virginity. And the next morning, he barely said a word to her before kicking her out, using the excuse that his parents would be home soon and she couldn't be there when they arrived. When she said goodbye, she tried to kiss him, but he turned away. Being young and naive, she daydreamed that he'd break up with his girlfriend, and they'd start a relationship. For the first time since Casey had been murdered, Hannah was happy. She felt like a normal teenager. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was falling in love. Yet her calls to him went unanswered and unreturned, and the 5 or 6 times she drove by his house, his car was never in the driveway. Their next shift together was a week after they had sex. That entire day, she rehearsed exactly how she'd act and exactly what she'd say, obsessing over the color of eyeshadow to wear and practicing her smile in the mirror over and over and over again. After pulling into a parking spot, she spit her gum into the ashtray, applied cherry red lipstick, her favorite color, and smiled in the rearview mirror one final time. Then she stepped out of her car and skipped across the parking lot and into the store. The moment she saw Corey, she ran up and attempted to hug him, but he kept his distance, barely acknowledging her. Throughout the shift, he ignored her every time she tried to talk to him, always escaping to the back room or outside for a cigarette. Finally, she cornered him near the new release section. "Are you mad at me?" The words rushed out. "Just been really busy." It feels like you're trying to ignore me or something." "No," he said, shaking his head, avoiding eye contact. "Okay," Hannah said uncertainly. After a gaping pause, she said, "I was wondering if you wanted to hang out tonight, if you don't have any plans." "I can't." "Well, maybe we could do something next weekend then, possibly." His eyes eventually settled on her, and she knew what he was going to say before he spoke. "Listen, you're a nice girl, but the other night was a mistake." Her legs went weak. "A mistake? You told me you liked me." "I was fucking wasted. I'm sure I said a lot of dumb shit." Her heart was slowly breaking. "But I thought we were going to be together." A smirk formed. "You really thought I was going to break up with Jackie to be with you? I was drunk, okay? We fucked, and that's it, nothing more. And I can promise it'll never happen again." Unable to speak, Hannah watched Corey walk away, tears blurring her vision. Before he was out of view, she cursed him under her breath, then turned away and fled from the store, never to return or speak to Corey again. On the drive home that day, Hannah had become numb, and much like being blackout drunk, she couldn't remember the walk to her car or stopping at intersections or putting on her pajamas or grabbing the razor blade and resting it against her right wrist. It wasn't that Hannah was suicidal. She just wanted the pain to stop. The pain over how she'd lost her virginity in a drunken stupor, the pain of falling for someone who'd only used her for sex, the pain of never being able to see or talk to Casey again, the pain of her survivor's guilt, knowing she should have been on the couch when the killer entered the apartment, the pain that her parents were broken beyond repair, her dad a full-blown alcoholic and her mother distant and detached, and the pain that she might never be as close to anyone again as she had been with Casey. She very well might be alone for the rest of her life.